Two people can lift the exact same weight, eat the exact same meal, and grow at completely different speeds. The reason has nothing to do with effort. Muscle does not grow while you are training. It grows while you are asleep, doing nothing at all. That single fact changes everything about how you should train. Somewhere inside your body, right now, a war is being fought between two forces. One wants to break your muscle down. The other wants to build it up. Every rep you have ever lifted, every meal you have ever eaten, every night you have ever slept has been a vote cast in that war. Most people think building muscle is about willpower. It is not. It is about biology, and biology follows a blueprint. For decades, the fitness industry has sold shortcuts, powders, machines, secret routines. But underneath all of it lies a set of mechanisms that have not changed since the first human being picked up a heavy rock and put it down again. This is the story of how a human body actually builds muscle, from the level of a single protein filament to the level of a life fully transformed. To understand growth, you first have to understand what muscle actually is. Skeletal muscle is made of long fibers, each one a single elongated cell packed with smaller strands called myofibrils. Inside those myofibrils sit two proteins, actin and myosin, arranged in repeating units called sarcomeres. When a nerve signal arrives, myosin heads grab onto actin filaments and pull, shortening the sarcomere. Multiply that pull across millions of sarcomeres and you get a muscle contraction strong enough to lift a barbell, carry a child, or sprint from danger. Muscle does not grow while you are lifting. It grows afterward, in the quiet hours your body spends repairing with the lifting damaged. When a muscle fiber is placed under enough mechanical tension, microscopic damage occurs along the filament structure. The body detects this damage and responds by activating a repair and rebuilding process. This is the entire secret of hypertrophy. Not the pain, not the pump, the damage, and more importantly, the repair. The repair process runs on a pathway inside muscle cells known as mechanistic target of rapamycin, or mTOR for short. Think of mTOR as a construction foreman standing inside the cell. When mechanical tension, nutrient availability, and certain hormones all send the right signals at once, mTOR flips into an active state and orders the cell to begin building new proteins. This process is called muscle protein synthesis. As long as the rate of muscle protein synthesis exceeds the rate of muscle protein breakdown, the muscle fiber grows a little thicker. Do this consistently, thousands of times, and a visibly larger muscle emerges. This is why the single most important variable in any training program is called progressive overload. The muscle only has a reason to grow if it is asked to do something it currently cannot easily do. Lift the same weight for the same number of repetitions forever, and the body has no incentive to change. But add a small amount of weight or a small amount of volume every few weeks, and the body is forced to adapt by getting stronger and larger. Progressive overload can come from heavier loads, more repetitions, more total sets, shorter rest periods, or simply better technique that increases the tension a muscle actually experiences. The method matters less than the principle. The muscle must be challenged beyond what it is currently prepared for. Scientists generally describe three overlapping drivers of hypertrophy. The first is mechanical tension, the force placed directly on the muscle fiber during a controlled lift. The second is metabolic stress, the burning sensation and cellular swelling that comes from high repetition training, caused by a buildup of metabolic byproducts inside the muscle. The third is muscle damage itself, the microscopic tearing of fibers that triggers the repair cascade. For most of the 20th century, muscle damage was believed to be the main driver. Modern research has shifted the emphasis towards mechanical tension as the dominant factor, with metabolic stress playing a meaningful supporting role. This is why a slow, controlled, heavy lift often builds more long-term size than fast, sloppy repetitions, even if the sloppy repetitions feel more exhausting. Not all muscle fibers behave the same way under this process. The body contains two broad categories of skeletal muscle fiber. Type 1 fibers are slow twitch, built for endurance, rich in mitochondria and resistant to fatigue. Type 2 fibers are fast twitch, built for explosive power and far more responsive to hypertrophy training. Most muscles contain a mixture of both, and the ratio is largely determined by genetics. This is one reason two people can follow an identical training program and see different rates of growth. One person may simply carry a higher percentage of fast twitch fibers in a given muscle group. Genetics do not decide whether you can build muscle. They decide how quickly and to what final ceiling your particular body responds. There is also a second, quieter dimension to hypertrophy that many training programs ignore. Muscle growth is not only about adding new contractile protein inside existing muscle fibers, known as myofibrillar hypertrophy. There is also sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, an increase in the fluid, glycogen, and non-contractile substances surrounding those fibers. Bodybuilders training with higher repetitions and shorter rest periods tend to see more of this fluid-based growth, which is part of why physique athletes and powerlifters can display very different types of muscle size relative to their raw strength. Neither is superior. They are different expressions of the same underlying repair system, shaped by different training stimuli. None of this repair work is possible without raw material, and that is where nutrition enters the blueprint. Muscle protein synthesis requires amino acids, the building blocks of protein, and one amino acid in particular plays an outsized role. Leucine acts as a direct trigger for the mTOR pathway described earlier. This is why sufficient protein intake, spread across the day, is one of the most well-established variables in muscle growth research. The exact optimal amount is debated, but a wide body of evidence points toward roughly 1.6 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight daily for most people actively training for hypertrophy. Beyond protein, the body also needs enough total energy. Attempting to build significant muscle while in a large calorie deficit fights against the body's own priorities, since a starved body prioritizes survival over construction. A modest calorie surplus, or at minimum a stable calorie intake, gives the repair system the fuel it needs to actually finish the job that training started. Hormones act as the messengers that coordinate all of this. Testosterone increases muscle protein synthesis and reduces protein breakdown, which is part of why men who carry roughly 10 times the testosterone levels of women tend to build muscle mass more rapidly in absolute terms. Growth hormone and insulin-like growth hormone 1 support tissue repair and the activation of satellite cells, specialized stem cells that live on the outside of muscle fibers and donate their nuclei to damaged fibers during repair, effectively giving the muscle more genetic machinery to build with. Insulin, released in response to food intake, helps shuttle amino acids and glucose into muscle cells, supporting both the fuel and the raw material needed for growth. These hormonal systems do not act alone. They respond to how a person trains, eats, and sleeps, which means the environment a person creates for their body ultimately shapes how favorably these chemical messengers behave. Sleep may be the most underrated variable in the entire blueprint. The majority of growth hormone released each day occurs during deep sleep. Sleep deprivation has been shown to elevate cortisol, a stress hormone that promotes protein breakdown while simultaneously reducing testosterone and impairing the body's insulin sensitivity. A person who trains with perfect intensity but sleeps 5 hours a night is sabotaging the very repair window their training was designed to trigger. Muscle is not built in the gym. It is only damaged in the gym. It is built later, primarily at night, while the body is unconscious and the repair systems finally have the resources and quiet to do their work. This is also why rest days and deload periods are not signs of laziness, but essential components of the system. Training the same muscle group with high intensity every single day without adequate recovery windows eventually pushes the balance from net protein synthesis toward net protein breakdown. This state, often called overtraining, is marked by stalled progress, elevated resting heart rate, poor sleep, and a rising risk of injury. The body cannot repair what it never stops damaging. A well-designed program spaces training sessions for a given muscle group with enough recovery time, typically 48 to 72 hours, for the repair cycle to complete before the next stimulus arrives. Given everything described so far, several popular claims about muscle building fall apart under scrutiny. Spot reduction and its close cousin, spot growth, the belief that training one small area in isolation produces disproportionate localized results, has little support in the research once total training volume for a muscle group is accounted for. Extreme soreness the day after training, often mistaken as proof that a workout was effective, is not a reliable measure of muscle growth at all. Many highly effective sessions produce little soreness, while some ineffective sessions produce a great deal. And the idea that muscle can be built with high repetition, extremely light training alone, with no meaningful mechanical tension, runs against the central biological mechanism this entire blueprint depends on. The muscle must be challenged in proportion to its current capacity, whether that challenge comes through moderate repetitions with heavier loads or higher repetitions carried closer to genuine muscular failure. Age changes this blueprint but does not cancel it. Beginning in a person's 30s, the body enters a slow, natural decline in muscle mass known as sarcopenia, driven partly by declining hormone levels and partly by reduced physical activity. Yet study after study confirms that resistance training remains one of the most powerful tools available at any age to slow and in many cases reverse this decline. Muscle protein synthesis does become somewhat less responsive to a given amount of protein in older adults, a phenomenon researchers call anabolic resistance, which is part of why nutrition guidelines often recommend slightly higher protein intakes for older individuals pursuing muscle retention. The blueprint bends with age. It does not disappear. Not every exercise contributes to this blueprint in the same way. Compound movements, such as squats, deadlifts, presses, and rows, recruit multiple muscle groups and joints at once, allowing a person to move heavier total loads and generate large amounts of mechanical tension across the body in a single session. Isolation movements, such as curls, leg extensions, or lateral raises, target a single muscle group directly, allowing for focused tension when a compound movement fails to sufficiently challenge a smaller or lagging muscle. The most effective training programs generally combine both. Compound lifts build the foundation of overall size and strength, while isolation work fills in the gaps compound movements leave behind. Neither approach alone completes the picture the way the combination does. Supplementation is often oversold, but one compound has consistently proven itself in the research: creatine monohydrate. Creatine increases the availability of a molecule called phosphocreatine inside muscle cells, which helps regenerate the energy used during short, powerful efforts. This allows a person to perform slightly more repetitions or lift slightly more weight across a training session, which over time compounds into meaningfully more total tension applied to the muscle. Creatine also appears to draw additional water into muscle cells, contributing modestly to cell volume, a factor some researchers believe may itself signal the cell toward growth. Beyond creatine, few other supplements have demonstrated anywhere near the same weight of supporting evidence. A well-designed diet built around adequate protein, sufficient calories, and consistent hydration will outperform any powder or pill the market has to offer. Women and men follow largely the same underlying blueprint, since the biological machinery of mechanical tension, protein synthesis, and repair does not differ by sex. What differs is the hormonal environment surrounding that machinery. Lower circulating testosterone in most women generally results in a slower rate of absolute muscle mass accumulation compared to men following an identical program, though relative gains as a percentage of existing muscle mass are often comparable. This means the same principles, progressive overload, sufficient protein, and adequate recovery, apply equally across sexes, even though the visible pace and ceiling of growth can differ. Progress rarely moves in a straight line, and this is where periodization enters the blueprint. As a person adapts to a given training stimulus, the same weight or repetition scheme that once triggered growth eventually becomes routine maintenance rather than a true challenge. Periodization structures training into deliberate phases, often cycling between periods of higher volume, periods of heavier intensity, and short periods of reduced load for recovery, so the body continually faces a stimulus it has not yet fully adapted to. Without this kind of planned variation, most people eventually hit a plateau, not because their body has stopped being capable of growth, but because their training has stopped asking anything new of it. One final piece, often overlooked in favor of purely mechanical explanations, is the connection between mind and muscle. Research using electromyography has shown that deliberately focusing attention on the contracting muscle during a lift can measurably increase the activation of that muscle compared to simply moving the weight from point A to point B. This does not replace the need for heavy, progressive loading, but it does suggest that intention and attention themselves play a small, measurable role in how effectively a given repetition translates into tension on the target muscle. The mind, in a very literal sense, participates in the construction of the body. When every piece is placed together, the picture becomes remarkably simple, even if executing it consistently is not. Mechanical tension, delivered through progressively harder training, damages the muscle fiber in a controlled and purposeful way. Adequate protein and total calories supply the raw material the repair process requires. Hormonal signaling, shaped heavily by sleep and recovery, coordinates the actual construction. Time, applied consistently across weeks, months, and years, allows small, repeated adaptations to accumulate into visible, lasting change. Remove any one piece of this system and the entire structure weakens. Train without adequate protein and the body lacks material to rebuild with. Eat perfectly, but never challenge the muscle, and there is no signal for growth in the first place. Do both correctly but sleep 5 hours a night, and the repair window closes before the work can finish. Consistency, more than any single variable already described, is what ultimately separates those who build significant muscle from those who do not. A training program that generates optimal mechanical tension paired with perfect nutrition and perfect sleep still produces only a small, almost invisible amount of adaptation after a single week. The visible transformation people associate with serious muscle growth is not the product of any one exceptional month. It is the product of dozens of unremarkable months, each one applying the same handful of principles with only minor variation, stacked on top of one another until the accumulated effect becomes undeniable. This is part of why so many training programs fail, not because the underlying science is wrong, but because the person applying it abandons the process before enough repetitions of the cycle have occurred for the biology to fully express itself. Injury prevention deserves a place in this blueprint as well, since a damaged joint or torn tissue can remove a person from training entirely, erasing months of accumulated progress in a single afternoon. A proper warm-up, gradually increasing blood flow and core temperature while rehearsing the movement pattern about to be trained, prepares connective tissue for the loads that follow. Technique that keeps a joint within a safe and controlled range of motion allows the muscle, rather than a ligament or tendon, to absorb the majority of the training stress. And a program that increases load or volume gradually, rather than in sudden dramatic jumps, gives tendons and connective tissue, which adapt more slowly than muscle fibers themselves, the time they need to keep pace with the growing muscle. The strongest blueprint in the world produces no result at all if an injury removes a person from the process it depends on. There is something almost philosophical hidden inside this biology. The body does not grow in response to comfort. It grows in response to a controlled, repeated confrontation with a demand it cannot yet meet, followed by rest, followed by more demand. Stress, then recovery, then adaptation. It is, in many ways, the same pattern that governs how a person builds resilience, skill, or discipline in any other part of life. The muscle simply makes that pattern visible, written directly onto the human frame in the language of tissue. This is the blueprint, not a secret, not a shortcut, a set of mechanisms tested and confirmed across decades of research, waiting for anyone willing to apply them with enough patience to let biology finish what training only begins.